Okay, so what we are going to be doing today is expanding on the previous tool that we used, which was creating the primer stitch for going on a towel. We're going to take it to the next step and we're going to create this shape. It's just a random shape that I picked out online that I liked. And we're going to create a primer stitch, and in this case I actually made it a decorative because that's going to be one of the highlights of it and my initials, so that when I stitch it out, this part of the towel will show through. So what I'm going to do is start a new document and just walk through from the beginning how I created this design. Let's see. Okay, so we have a new piece of paper here. And so basically what I did is I went online and I just did a search for line shapes, and I just found the shape that I was interested in. And in this case, it's this kind of swoopy looking design. I don't even know how to say it, but it looks rather interesting, so I thought I would make it look like that. Here we go, I'll zoom in. There's the shape. Okay, so I'm going to grab my fill tool because our whole object is to knock this down. So we're going to use this primer stitch to lay all of those loops of the towel down so that the accent that we see is actually the towel showing through. So we're just going to draw that fill so we can get our primer stitch, and we're going to select our primer stitch that we created previously and use that in this design. And then we're going to play with it and see what other fun things we can do. Let's get our shape first. And you could go slower and be more exact, especially if you had like more intense of a shape. This one just seemed pretty easy to flow. All right, and enter. I'm not sure why, but all right, so you could, if you were going to do just a freehand shape inside of this as opposed to a letter, I want to put a letter inside here. So I'm going to skip the whole tool again for this project. Enter. I'm going to do my start and stop points here and my stitch direction because all of that's going to change later, just so we can get it on the screen and work with it. Okay, so now that we have our design, I'm going to hide this graphic so I don't have it behind there in my way anymore. And I'm going to work with this fill. So previously, we created a preset that was our primer stitch. So I'm going to go back to that primer stitch and apply that. If you like your primer stitch and this is just fine for this project, you can leave it that way. If you have a if you want to make it special or unique, like I did in my previous design, I actually changed it from a fill type to a decorative stitch type. When you change it to a decorative stitch type, there's a whole new selection of things that you can choose from. So we'll make our primer stitch, it'll go away. Because what we're going to pick instead is a pattern. So the pattern that I showed in my example in the beginning was this spin tool here. So when I apply that, it just gives me this really cool looking little diamond spinning shape, which I like. So I'm going to sew it out with this. So all of your densities and underlays and everything just needs to be default. So we have our shape. Now what we're going to do is pick our letter. So I'm going to do my last name, letter, which is a C. And I'm going to do it, you want to keep the font that you choose thick and chunky because you want sections of that towel to show through. So just make sure that, like a thin one you wouldn't want to do, but you could do like this century one would be a good one because the actual letter's thick. And if it's not quite thick enough, you can always go into your pull compensation and add a few points, and you can get crazy with these points because you just want to get the shape of your C. We'll go, that looks great. excuse me. All right, 2 inches for this, my letter. Center my letter. That should be good. Excellent. I like that. So now what we're going to do is there's a really cool function in the software where if you have your letter highlighted, we want to actually chop out all of the stitches in this little spin background behind the C. We want to make those stitches go away. So we're going to use the C as our template. And now I'm going to hold the Shift key down and select the complex fill. And when you have your first item selected and then the item you want the stitches to disappear, select it second with the Shift key. When you do that, what will appear are these little symbols in the corner. And there's one that says subtract element. And I believe it's also in the drop down. Maybe it's not in the drop down. Object. Subtract elements. There it is. It's under object. Subtract elements. When I click on this, the software takes away the stitches from behind the letter C. So if I move it out of the way, you can see I have a hole now in the shape of my C. Put it in 3D so you can really see it much better on the screen. So I really don't need this letter anymore, so I'm just going to delete that with the keypad. Sometimes when you have really decorative stitches like this, the software is trying to draw this, and it gave me this really weird line in this letter C. So I'm just going to grab the Stitch Direction tool, turn that on, and that will allow me to move this around. And all it takes is just a little bit different direction, and the computer can then do the math to come around the corner of that C. All right, so we have our shape. We have our embossed shape, which is the letter C. Now we need to put some nice satin stitches around the edges of this. So all I'm going to do is right-click on this and go to my operations. Under the operations, there is a Change Element Type tool. And when you click on the Change Element Type tool, it's going to pull up a list. And for this, I want all of the stitches to be equal, same size, left, right, coming off of the edges here. So I'm just going to pick single line center because it works. It's nice and easy. And I like the properties of the single line center to work with later. So I'm going to add that to my design, and it just populates this beautiful satin stitch all the way around the inside edge and the outside edge of the shape that I drew. 20 points for the width of this is a little thin, so I might want to beef this up. I really like 35 for my edge, just like I would on a patch. Nice and thick and bold. There it is, nice and beautiful. And you could go in and clean up your shape if you wanted to. You could absolutely edit any part of this. What do you do if you don't have Design Shop Pro Plus with all of these quick added little extra features? You can simply go from your shape that you have now, and what we're going to do is I'm going to leave my C in here, and I don't think I added my pole comp to this one. Let me add those back in. There we go, beef it up. All right, so what I'm going to do is use that as my template to draw. Let's zoom in just a little bit. That's good. And I want to select the fill that I'm working with here. And you can, when you have a complex fill, add a hole to the design, which is what the quick tool does for you. But we're going to add it in manually. So in the software over here where you have the fill, you'll need to go over to where it says, so it's there. Okay. So we're going to go over and select our input hole, and it will let us go in and punch a hole in this manually. And it can be in any shape. I just am doing the letter C. Most of the time you're going to be making a pretty monogram. All right, and I'm just going to draw this C. It just is manual, so you just got to go through the steps and do it. We're going to go right around the edge. And I could probably go a little slower and be a little prettier, but it's okay. All right, so we got our hole. Let's see. We'll take our lettering. We'll move it out of the way. And it worked. We punched our hole in. All right, so we're going to delete that. Now, there is a keyboard shortcut where you can, shift ain't working. Complex fill, shift, shift, control replaces it, shift adds it. Okay, so that is another shortcut. If you don't have that shortcut, it's still not a problem. You have your fill with your hole, and you grab your single line center tool. I'm going to go ahead and set my width for 35 because that's what I like, and you're going to draw it all again. And so all of this just depends on what level software you're working with and what tools are available for you. If you don't want to do this stuff manually, contact your sales rep, upgrade your software to get all the bells and whistles. And enter. Oh, I didn't hit shift. Oh well. We can just edit that. Move that over. Drop it right on top of that one. And it's something like that. Now we're into editing. That looks good. I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to this stuff because what it's going to matter is when it sews out on the towel. And a little deformity in the edge or a little deformity in your letter is really going to disappear on the edge when it comes down to the finished product on the towel. And that's the cool part about towels. They're forgiving in that way with all the fuzz. We're almost done. We're about halfway. And the noise you hear in the background is dinner being made. Shift and enter. And enter to do the default width. And voila, we have the same thing. It was just done manually. So it just depends on what tools are available. All right, let's stitch this out. On my towel, I have this kind of denim colored towel that I'm going to be using. And so I picked a matching thread color to go with it. I think that works really well. So I have my towel hoops, and I just have a piece of heavyweight tearaway on the back side. And I'm going to put this on the machine and do some sewing. Alright, so I have the design loaded, and since it's only one color, it's just going to be that pretty blue that I have. We've got our design, we've got our color. I'm still using the same hoop. I'm going to change my setting back to the sweatshirt because I like my tension nice and loose on the towel. And my speed is going to be just fine. Here's the machine. We're about ready to go. Okay, so I put in my salvie and have my design in the corner, but I do need to do my flip, my 180, so that it is right side up. There we go. Now we have a right side up. So it will stitch over here in the corner of my towel on my salvie. Oh, it's looking pretty. You can already see that pattern starting to form. This is going to be amazing.